What's going on, Bruin Nation? Great to see everybody after a few days. And what can I say? The guy to my right over here, Shady's back again. Shady's back. Tell a friend. Will the Thrill Decker, Thrill, as much as the last couple of weeks, couple days, last 8-10 days have kind of taken away from us with the fires and the tragedies and everything that sort of happened in Los Angeles. And, our hearts and prayers go out to everybody in the LA community. One glimmer, sliver of hope is that Pepperdine basketball had to sort of move their schedule, which has sort of allowed Will the Thrill to sort of be on the podcast, be back home this week for a little bit with UCLA, of course. But as always, brother, so great to see you, and I can't wait to sort of get all into it. But first of all, it's just so great to see you.
So great to see you, bro. It's, I miss our weekly chats. And when Pepperdine has a little bit of a lull, we've had to cancel our last two games I was supposed to broadcast. Spoiler alert, you were actually going to try to join me for one of those games, which would have been amazing. But the wildfires were ravaging up near Malibu. They had to cancel them kind of last second. I'm like, I need to talk sports, and there's a lot to talk about with what's going on in the current UCLA landscape. Once again, super weird that you're bringing me on, the other way around. But
totally weird.
Dude, I can't think of something more fun than being on this with you and just talking about everything that's going on with UCLA. So just honored to be back, man, and excited to talk all things UCLA.
Well, it's great. It's great to have you back home, Thrill. That's the way I love to describe it. And so lots to unpack. I think it's been sort of a wild time here the last few days and few weeks with UCLA athletics. I think we'll start with the appetizer, and then we'll go to the main course. And I think in this particular case, the appetizer is some of the updates with the football program, and the main course is what's going on in basketball, which is what, we've alluded to even on the last episode here. On the football side, Will, since this podcast's last conversation, 3 transactions for the football team, 2 outgoing, unfortunately, and 1 incoming. From an outgoing perspective, Kaeo Akana, one of our defensive linemen from Utah, was a transfer from Utah to UCLA. Ultimately now decommits from UCLA and goes back home to Hawaii. And then Tykeus Crawford, one of our decorated incoming offensive line recruits, 4-star, really big kid, 6'5", 325, coming over from Arkansas, now decommits and goes to West Virginia. In these 2 particular cases, Will, hard to sort of argue with it in a lot of ways. With Akana, the opportunity to go back home. He's born and raised in Hawaii, still has such deep ties to that program. Comes from a very close-knit family, actually went back home for the holidays, realized how homesick he was and wanted to play there. Close relationship with Timmy Chang, and a lot of guys that he played high school with are on that team. So you can't really sort of knock that situation of Akana going back to Hawaii. And then I think in the case of Crawford, Will, it was a situation where, in this wild world of NIL and essentially an NFL light professionalization model, I think UCLA just got outbid by West Virginia. Yeah. And I think West Virginia came in with a very strong NIL package. And, these kids have to sort of make business decisions. So, I think those were the 2 circumstances that went into those 2 particular individuals sort of leaving the program, but not all doom and gloom, as we get an incoming wide receiver. Kadon Robinson comes in from Appalachian State last year, 53 catches, 840 yards, 2 touchdowns. Year before, Will, he caught 10 touchdowns. This really kind of feels like a compliment to Joey Aguilar and an opportunity for Aguilar to really try and win this starting spot with getting one of his former favorite targets. And you got to like what we're seeing here, Will, in the receiving room. I mean, you got TMA, you got Flores, you got Gilmer, Jaden Wilson from Arkansas, and now Robinson comes in from App State. And now I think overall, in losing Akana, in losing Crawford, I think there's a sense here, Will, we probably need 1 more offensive lineman, to sort of round out the rotation. And then I think we got to hit that defensive line now. We need 1 or 2 more defensive linemen, probably 1 on the interior, 1 on the edge, And then I think linebacker is sort of that last position of need as well. So I think there's probably 3 to 4 more gets here, 1 on O-line, 2 on D-line, 1 on linebacker. But just talk to me, man, on the sort of overall state here the last couple of days based on these transactions and just your overall take of things.
Yeah, let's start with the positive. Caden Robinson, this kid was very coveted in the portal. And you mentioned it, 2023, 10 touchdowns, had close to 1,000 yards receiving the last 2 years. Huge compliment to Joey Aguilar, who I think is going to be the placeholder at the quarterback position for UCLA. And you go back through the recent memory of UCLA quarterbacks, they all kind of have a guy. Remember Dorian Thompson-Robinson's last year? Who was getting the primary targets on those third downs? Jake Bobo, who's lighting up the Seahawks right now. We love him to death. That first year with Garbers, when he kind of took the reins, it was Logan Loya. Logan Loya was that guy for Ethan Garbers. Last year, I felt like Garbers just didn't have the time he normally did, and it was weird where we were calling for Loya and didn't get a lot of it. It ultimately became Matavau, right? I think that, to me, at the end of the year, Matavau was the guy. It's a huge reason he's going to the Senior Bowl, the most illustrious of the draft games that you can go to before the NFL draft itself. Caden Robinson, bro, I think this is Aguilar's guy, and I'm just really excited that UCLA can add that into the fold. This kid's talented, too. I mean, USC wanted him, and Auburn wanted him. These were offers within the transfer portal. Those are 2 powers, and he chose to follow his old quarterback to UCLA. So I know it looks like Appalachian State on paper, but I think this is one of the rare transfers from a lower tier school that can make an impact. And I mean, we got Rico coming back. We got Quasi, who looked like maybe the most adept freshman wide receiver that I can remember. Can you name a more adept freshman receiver for UCLA? You are more of the historian on this side.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably go Freddie Mitchell there, Will. He reminds me of Freddie Mitchell in a lot of ways too. And I know we sort of have, had conversations about Freddie Mitchell 2.0. That was probably the most like freshman ready that as a reference point. But since then, Will, hard to imagine having a true freshman wide receiver, of Gilmore status. And I expect him to make the big jump.
I mean, the receiving room's we didn't even mention Titus, who's coming back. So receiver room's loaded. We've talked about it. The last 4 to 5 years, this room has been stocked. It's like a pantry where, stuff is falling off the top. It's too full. It's going to come down to the trenches again, man. And I was bummed about Akana because I saw the potential in this kid. He was a 4-star guy. Kyle Whittingham, we talked about on the last episode where it was like any guy that's rubbed shoulders with Nick Saban, we like those guys. Kyle Whittingham, I know he had a down year last year, but Kyle Whittingham, pound for pound, is a top 5 coach in all of college football over the last decade within the sport. If he was good enough for Whittingham, there's a good chance we want him here at UCLA. So I really like that. We had a crucial opening at the edge spot. Remember last year we had Femi playing the edge, and luckily that's turned into a roaring success story. But you want to bring Akana back, man. That was a big one. I felt, yes, you can go to the portal, get more guys. Crawford was a big loss for me, too. I know he had only started, I think single-digit games. He was going to be a senior.
Yeah, it was about 6 games over the last 3 years. But still, Will, big rotational piece in the big bad SEC with Arkansas, and you need those guys. I mean, how many times, and the answer, spoiler alert, is 0. Do you sort of go having your top 5 offensive linemen healthy the whole season, so you're invariably going to go 6, 7, 8 deep at that position. And I think we sort of understand who the 5 are with the 3 gets in the portal, but, really needing to sort of reinforce that depth. So I agree with you. The Crawford loss is significant, and I think UCLA needs to supplement there.
Totally, man. So if they can replicate those losses with something nice, I feel like UCLA could be right back where I had them. This was a roaring success story, I think, what they were doing in the portal. They need to just fortify that D-line, get another offensive lineman in there, and I'll be back to feeling confident. But, dude, we are a lot further away than what I thought we were going to be, so there's a lot to be just excited about, I think, with UCLA in terms of these portal additions.
No, for sure, Will. And obviously there's still so much to go, until the kickoff of the season. Now we have to see how all these guys mesh in January, February, and March. And then, oh, by the way, there's another portal season, April 16th to the 25th, where more madness can happen. So it's just the nature of college football here, Will, we used to think this was a 3 or 4 month sport. And, you had signing day in December, and then you had kind of that All-American, the, bowl game, the Under Armour bowl game, early February. And then you're kind of chilling until spring ball. Oh, how those days are long gone. I mean, this is a 24/7, 365 sport now. So lots more to unpack in the weeks and the months to come. And we got you covered here on LAFBnetwork.com as always. Thriller, now that we've gotten the appetizer out of the way, I know you're licking your chops. I know you're ready to roll up your sleeves. I know you're salivating.
It just bums me out, man. You know what I mean? It's tough.
What has happened, Will, since you and I were sitting courtside at Intuit Dome with our buddy Norman Powell, watching Gonzaga UCLA, seeing UCLA come through in that triumph? At that moment in time, Will, this team was sitting at 11-2 with wins in 3 of their previous 5 games against the likes of Gonzaga, at Oregon, home against Arizona. Everything starts clicking. You feel like this is a Final Four caliber team. This is a team that is positioning itself for a deep conference run, perhaps a 1 seed, perhaps a 2 seed in the tournament. Really, the sky is the limit. And then since then, the wheels have absolutely fallen off, Will. Last time I spoke to our viewers and our audience, we were at 3 consecutive losses. And Cronin just ripped into the team after that Michigan game, called them soft, called them delusional, ripped into the players, ripped into the coaches, ripped into the referees, ripped into the conference, and said that it just, everybody but himself, and got into a long conversation about leadership there. That now was then followed up with a 4th consecutive loss. And again, Cronin gets back on the mic, talks about how Bilodeau got out physicaled, how this team really was detrimental in so many different ways. So, Will, there's the tactical elements, and I know you and I have talked about lineup changes, and we saw the lineup change, DA out, Mara in. That's is what we expected in terms of being able to go bigger moving forward. But then there's sort of the strategic conversation, like we mentioned last time, about what's going on inside Mick Cronin's head, and is he right for this job? I mean, I can't believe we're sort of saying this so quickly, but is he right for UCLA, the university, the values, the basketball program, and should he be the head basketball coach long-term moving forward? So a lot there, Will. Take it away.
Man, well, first and foremost, I think UCLA owes us some money, because if we were at these games, I don't think they lose. You and I are sitting behind the bench. They look great. They beat Gonzaga. Ever since we have gone to that game, Madman, they have not won, and it's been in sometimes embarrassing fashion. I mean, you go back to the Nebraska game on the road. It was a high-intensity Gonzaga game. You're kind of looking for that little trap game in between Michigan, which is going to be a future rival within this conference. I mean, man, they shot 2 of 20 from the three-point line that game. Just got out-rebounded, out-physical by Nebraska. That was a red flag for me. I'm like, Nebraska, not really a basketball school per se compared to what UCLA has. It was fun to see Burke on the other team, I will say that. But, I mean, that was a red flag. And the Michigan game, the struggles continue. Golden looked like prime David Robinson in the paint there.
Yeah.
This guy was just exposing the UCLA defense. They shot 4 of 28 from 3. I mean, you cannot shoot worse from 3 in a 2-game stretch than what they shot during those. They picked it up a little bit in the last 2, but, you're playing Rutgers, a team that has 2 potential top 5 picks in Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Still think we should have won that game. It's Maryland, we got absolutely decimated. I don't know what the answer is. You talked about it. You need to have 2 guards scoring double figures for this team to be successful. Dylan Andrews looks lost out there, man. And I had kind of come around to Dylan Andrews, and right when I came around to him, he hit the Oregon game winner, and we're winning, doing big things. He has really, really, really struggled in the short term here. And they brought in Stefanovic to start the last game against Rutgers. They've done different things, but the scariest part, if you're a UCLA fan, the shooting is one thing. The defense has been so out of character for Mick Cronin. I was reading Ben Bolch's piece today on what happened against Maryland. Dude, they have allowed 5 halves out of 8 halves of over 40 points.
Yeah.
That is so uncharacteristic for UCLA basketball. And I want to ask you this. I'm going to put it back to you, man. He ripped the team pretty badly publicly. There's a line for these athletes where, they're willing to take it if it's face-to-face and you kind of, just pat them on the ass and say, hey, I love you. I'm in your corner. Let's go out and do this. You played soft tonight, but, let's get after it tomorrow. Let's get to it. When you do that to the media, I feel like that's a totally different thing than doing that in the locker room to your guys. Soft is one of those words where athletes will get incredibly triggered by. Do you think he crossed a line there? Because I think that is dangerous, and I know that's his style. But to blame everyone except for yourself, I kind of felt like that was a little out of character for Mick and a little disappointing. The results have shown the last 2 games since he's done that.
Well, I think our viewers know where I stand on it. It's absolutely he crossed the line. I don't think you can do that. And in knowing folks kind of close to the university, they're very unhappy with what happened there because this is now starting to become a question of whether or not he aligns with Bruin values. Does he represent this university in the best way? And I've had a number of people come to me and say, I'm not sure I would send my son to go play for Mick Cronin. And because of just the demeanor, number one, he's very demonstrative, and that has sort of rubbed people the wrong way from time to time. But it's also been kind of a badge of honor on the other side, right? In this world of the new college basketball, NBA light professionalization of the game, he's this breath of fresh air. He's old school. He's ready to sort of get tough, get physical. He's ready to sort of be a disciplinarian. So there was a school of thought that said, hey, this is actually the perfect breath of fresh air that perhaps the new age high school recruit and young college player needs to sort of build the mental fortitude to be successful both in college as well as the NBA. But it's a different thing, Will, when you go and just run everybody under the bus and you do it publicly. And here's the most telling element here. I think he tried to use it as a motivational technique. People forget that he said very similar things in the COVID year. The year before the magical Final Four run, he said very similar things. The team was sort of floundering. They were right around 500. And then from there, that team responded and won 11 out of 13 before the season was obviously cut short due to COVID. And so I think he thought he could sort of press that button again. But the problem is, Will, this is a different roster. These are different players. That team was kind of more of a blue-collar, lunch pail team. He was early in his tenure. He didn't have as many decorated recruits. Obviously, Jaquez ended up becoming a superstar, but you didn't know kind of what you had in Jaquez early. A lot of other kind of journeyman recruits. So they sort of responded to it saying, we're just sort of happy to be on the court. We're just happy to be at UCLA. So even if the coach is sort of ripping into us, hey, at least we're on the team. Let's go galvanize. Let's go make it happen. This is a much more decorated group of players here, Will. You're talking about starters and stars on other Power 4 teams. You're talking about McDonald's All-Americans. You're talking about 5-star guys. They're not going to just all respond in the same way to how he went about doing things. And I think the biggest red flag for me, Will, over these last 2 games since he said it, because it's a 4-game losing streak. He said it after the Michigan game. This team has gotten outscored significantly in the second half of both of these games. Yeah. So after you go and you give your halftime speech and you make your halftime adjustments and you're interacting with your team directly, they're coming back out and laying an egg, which means that, A, you've crossed the line that they are not responding to you. And I think how he sort of manages this moving forward is going to, I think, be critical to whether or not he can be retained long-term, because have these guys quit on him, have these guys shut off on him. UCLA is not going to, God forbid, lose a game by 50 like what happened against Utah last year, but are they starting to tune him out, and are they going to tune him out more and more as the season progresses if losses pile up and the opportunity to make the tournament does not exist anymore?
Yeah, and, I think I was expecting some sort of wall with this team. There was so much overturn. They have to learn how to play with each other. I mean, Daly, Kobe Johnson, Bilodeau, all these dudes are new imports to the program. So it's going to take a while for them to gel and hit that sweet spot. just how hard they've floundered in these past 4 games. It's concerning. I think it's one thing to get blown out by Michigan, but when you're losing to the likes of Nebraska and, Rutgers, I know they've got some talented players, but I just felt like that was kind of a must-win game given the circumstances, and to just blow it like you did in the second half. There's just not a lot to go off of positively right now for UCLA basketball. And, it's similar to what we said about Bieniemy, in a funny way, just the disciplinarian, the tyrant in a lot of ways. And I love Mick. I still like Mick a lot, and I'm rooting for his success. But he better figure it out quickly, because that seat is getting hotter and hotter with each game. And, USC football coming to the Big Ten. We all thought this was – I'm excited that it didn't work, but a lot of the people, were saying this was going to be a roaring success. They kind of floundered. They had that, LSU win at the beginning of the season. Oh, USC's back. We have that win against Gonzaga. Oh, UCLA basketball is back. And then we just could not take the strength of schedule within the conference, similar to them. So I don't know if it's just an LA thing. I don't know what's going on here, but I've been disappointed in the 2 blue blood schools when it comes to football and basketball in the city of LA. And unfortunately, our UCLA Bruins have got to step it up, man.
No, Will, I think that was really well said. And I think the analogy with USC football is a really appropriate one, both in terms of expectations and outcomes. Let's hope UCLA basketball has a different ending than USC football did, where there's time to be able to turn it around. And that's where college basketball is more forgiving than college football, because if we want to take the glass half full approach, Will, everybody forgets before the magical 2021 Final Four run of 5 games in a row. Remember, it was first 4 to Final Four. UCLA lost 4 games in a row, literally, and that's what forced them to get into the first 4 games. So it isn't unprecedented in the Cronin era that 4 straight losses is catastrophic. It's the death blow. But I agree with you. The way this team is looking right now, with a lack of identity offensively, they look scared offensively. They look tentative offensively. I mentioned it in our last episode. And now, to your point, Will, 5 of the last 8 halves giving up 40, which is so un-Cronin-like, it tells you that he's not responding to them. And so now moving forward, Will, the big question is, can he relate to these guys in a way where they're going to listen and this thing can kind of get turned around? Because, Will, the trajectory right now is going the wrong way. 21, the magical Final Four run. Then 22 and 23, back-to-back Sweet 16s. And potentially 24 and 25 back-to-back missing the tournaments. This thing is free-falling the other way if this holds up. So, obviously, and again, another analogy to USC football, much in the way the Lincoln Riley buyout is sort of significant and the Mick Cronin buyout is significant. And so he really needs to figure this thing out. Otherwise, he's putting Martin Jarman and the athletic department and the university in a very difficult and precarious position going into the 26th season.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm ready to completely panic on Mick just yet. I think I need to see another 4 to 5 game stretch before I'm ready to, plant my flag on whether he should stay or not. You are the ultimate guru when it comes to basketball, and I love hearing your opinions on this. If you were Mick Cronin, Madman, what would you do to fix the roster right now to get us out of this funk? Because you and I were talking, and I go, what are the expectations? And this is how much UCLA fans need to know about Madman, is I've seen this guy as high as a kite when they win, and I've never seen him lower when they lose. So Madman wears his heart on his sleeve for UCLA sports. You guys need to know that. But when I asked you at the game, I'm like, what is a successful season? What needs to happen for UCLA to, essentially reach their ceiling of this season? And you go Final Four or bust. That's what you told me against Gonzaga.
Absolutely.
And it's been 4 games since then. So what do we need to do to get back on that trajectory to get to the Final Four and make that ceiling a reality?
Will, I think, and number one, I stand by that, because when you look at the roster, it's a Final Four roster, Will, in terms of the depth, the versatility, and the toughness, the experience. And then when you factor it in, where you feel like we really missed some opportunities in 23, particularly in 23 with the bad luck with Bona and Clark, And then even in 22, Will, off of the Final Four team, it felt like we had more than a Sweet 16 in us. Might have been an Elite Eight, may not have been all the way to the Final Four, but there was a little bit more there that we left off the table. And so when you feel like you've left some things on the table the last couple of years, you really want to be able to maximize the roster here moving forward. For me, Will, I think tactically, he's got to bring Mara into the starting lineup and move everybody up. And so I think you got to go Mara at the 5, Bilodeau at the 4, Daly at the 3, Kobe at the 2, Clark at the 1, and you start going traditional 1-2-2. Clark is your lead guard, and then you got your 2 wings in Kobe and Daly, and then you got your 2 guys on the block in Bilodeau and Mara, and you can run all kinds of action. High pick and roll, down screens, high-low, really get a lot of movement going. 3-man weave at the top, and really start spacing the floor well. I think Mac has to be your unquestioned 6th man, and then you're probably going to need to play Trent Perry more, because I think he's somebody that there's a dynamism to him that he brings to the table. I think strategically, this is about give and take, okay? It cannot be when you've led with such an iron fist and then you've gone and ripped these guys, you have to now come back in a place where you're willing to put your arm around these guys in a place of collaboration. You say, look, guys, I've made some mistakes. I should not have gone public, and that's on me, and I'm going to be better, and I apologize to you guys. Here's where I think we can make this work. I need you guys to play elite defense because I know you're capable of it, and defense is going to be our calling card on this team. Now, but I see the ill of my ways in that offensively, I'm going to be okay with some turnovers. I'm going to be okay with some bad shots in the name of getting the ball moving around and in the name of these guys feeling more empowered. Because right now, Will, they look hesitant, they look scared, they look nervous, they look tentative. It's tough to watch. They're passing up open shots because they're afraid to make mistakes. So this is, I think, where Mick can lean in and say, we're going to go 1-2-2, but we got to be a little bit more free-flowing. But I need you guys to lock in defensively. And if we can do that, this team can kind of get back to where they are. Because, Will, Sky Clark is somebody who, as a lead guard, I don't think we have really seen his potential yet. This is a guy who wants to get out and run. He's a floor general. He's dynamic with the ball. Great decision maker in the open floor. If you give him 2 wings and you give him 2 guys on the block, and you can give him sort of a shooter off the bench, you are going to start creating pace in this game. And then Trent Perry can be the backup lead guard and do the same because that's also Perry's game. And then if things get clogged up from a bench perspective, just throw it to Mac and let him attack. Now, look, are the turnovers going to go up a little bit? Probably. Are there going to be some bad shots? I'm sure. But you're going to start now getting to a place where you're now consistently scoring 70, 75, 80 points, and then you want these guys to lock in defensively at key stretches of the game because that's going to be their identity, and they also stay fresh, Will, longer into the season and into a deep tournament run. Because that's the other knock with Cronin, right, is he plays such a tight rotation, and he goes so hard on defense. These guys have nothing left in the second half, and it's why all these blown leads have happened over the years. So that's how I would approach it. How about yourself?
It's kind of like Thibodeau, right, where he's just run these guys into the ground, similar to the Knicks coach. You made such a great comparison on this show where you compared Tyler Bilodeau to Pau Gasol in terms of their game. Stretch for kind of the more finesse side. What did Gasol need to do for that Lakers team to reach that ceiling? He needed a big bruiser behind him, and that was Andrew Bynum. William Kyle. Yep. Let's integrate this guy back in the lineup. This was Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Sky Conference. Not just a good defender, Defensive Player of the Year for the entire conference. I'd like to see that guy on the block. Mara, I love the length. It's going to make sure it's a lot more difficult for these guys to get in the paint and finish around the basket like they have. I'm sure Golden was going to get 30 anyways that night, but a few more of those shots were going to be deflected away if Mara was in the paint a little bit more. I really like, how you laid it out with Sky Clark, because I think from what I saw at the Gonzaga game and what we've been watching, we haven't seen the kid yet that was, one of the more impressive off-ball scorers within the ACC last year. I think he had like 40 plus in the ACC first round last year. So I'd like to see Sky Clark have a little bit more confidence on the floor and start shooting the ball like we saw him shoot it at Louisville. So you got that going for you. Eric Daly, I think there's three guys I feel confident in, even though we've been kind of slacking. It's Kobe Johnson, because I know what he does. He had 13 in the loss. He made some really good plays. And, yeah, he turned some stuff over. He had a critical foul where Mick actually ripped into him in the post-game presser. But Kobe Johnson, I just know what that guy is. I feel confident with him. I feel confident in Daly, and I feel confident in Mac. If the supporting cast can kind of uplift themselves, we need Stefanovic start shooting these threes right now. You know what I mean? We need the presence of the post to go off like we know we can with Ade Mara and these types of dudes. I just think you can have slumps and then you can let it affect you, or you can get up, and make this a real thing. And I think UCLA's got a chance to really get up and make this a thing, because this team is too damn talented to fold the way they're folding right now, man.
No, absolutely, Will. Really well said. And I think the unlock here, Will, as we're talking, and just to sort of reiterate, is it's pace. You got to get the pace going. Like, where has this team scored their most points or looked the most consistent offensively all year? It's been when they've pushed the pace off of turnovers, right? Like, their defense has generated turnovers. They've gone into space, hit open threes. Like, just go back and watch the tape of the Arizona game in that first half, right? Like, it was the turnovers, got guys out to run. Clark was able to hit his threes, start to look dynamic. And when you think about a Kobe Johnson, right, he's so talented, but he's taking such few shots in the game, right? Yeah. Because it's half court, it's slow, it's hard to sort of kind of stay integrated when you don't have sort of an ability to break down the defense. And Kobe Johnson's so focused defensively that I think it's taking away from his offense. Daly sometimes gets a little lost offensively. He's so versatile, but I think what happens with Daly is sometimes when you're such a versatile player, you don't have that sort of one go-to move or the one go-to thing that you want to do in the half court. And sometimes you need to kind of get out in pace to be able to unlock your game. Bilodeau, I think, could use the pace to not take the pounding, particularly at the 5. And then I think we talked about what this would mean for Sky Clark. And then I think you brought up a great point, Will. Whether you go Mara at the 5, whether you go Kyle at the 5, Kyle is your classic defensive player, rim runner, your old school Clint Capella, your even older school Tyson Chandler. Like, he's in that mold. Kyle's not going to do anything in the half court offensively. He's going to be a defensive guy. All of these guys can benefit from playing more in space. And then what you got to tell Mick has to kind of turn it a little bit more into the NBA and say, I'm willing for this game to be a little bit more free-flowing, but then in money time, final 10 minutes of the half, final 15 minutes of the half of the game, we got to lock in defensively. And what that's going to do is that's also going to preserve these guys a little bit more to make a deeper run. So now the question is he willing to do that, or is he going to be stubborn, double down, triple down, dig his heels in and say, we just have to do exactly what I'm doing, just even harder? And so far in his comments, in his approach, it feels like it's more the latter. Let's see if that's going to work, because if that doesn't work and there was such a clear path here as an alternative to be open and willing, that's going to be tough to swallow. Thrill, anything else you got here on the state of basketball moving forward before we wrap?
Man, just you're on the verge of losing the locker room like that coach of the football team across town. Just do not do that, man. It's teetering right now, man. And I want to say, man, I love coming on here with you. It is always so much fun. Just an honor to be back on the Bruin Bible and be in the presence of greatness. And it's a fun time, man.
Well, Thriller, this is home, and I'm excited about you coming and visiting anytime you want. And I'm sure it's going to be many more conversations over the course of the offseason. Brighter days ahead, Bruin Nation. I think there's still sort of a question of whether the Iowa game is going to be played or postponed in the location, so we'll stay tuned there. But as always, we got you covered here on LAFBnetwork.com. And win, lose, or draw, it's always 4's up forever.